So today we're going to talk about solving factored quadratic equations. And up to this point, the only thing with quadratics that I've given you are expressions, not equations. What's the difference between an expression and an equation? Yes?
An expression is like just saying something, an equation is like a problem, right?
Yeah, like this is an expression. This is an expression. This is an expression. This is an equation. This is an equation. 2x plus 3 equals 10. What's the difference? One has an equal sign, right? An equation has an equal sign. Can you solve these expressions?
Yeah.
You can't solve an expression. You can simplify it, right? But I can't solve it. Tell me what is x here in 2x plus 3. Anybody know?
No.
There's no way to solve it, right? There's no way to know. It could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 5, it could be 10, it could be a billion. Here, though, I can solve it, right? I subtract 3 from both sides. I got 2x equals 7 divided by 2, I get 7 halves, right? And that's my answer. I know x is 7 halves. Here, x could be anything. I don't know what it is, right? You see the difference? You can solve equations. You cannot solve expressions. So up to this point, we've only been dealing with, when we're talking quadratics, quadratic trinomials, right? But we couldn't solve them. We could simplify them. We could factor them, right? But we couldn't solve them. Today, we're now moving into solving them, okay? And so what we're going to be doing instead of this is the expression, right, that you guys have learned. It's ax squared plus bx plus c. You guys remember that? Yes? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes? So a is the number in front of the x squared. Rowan, I'm sorry. A is the number in front of the x squared. B is the number in front of the x. And c has no x at all, right? Now, there is no equal sign. So when we start doing an equation, it's going to be like this. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, the only thing I added is y equals. Okay? Now, I want you to understand what we're doing when we're solving. When you solve a quadratic equation, you are finding where a parabola crosses the x-axis. The x-axis. In other words, you are finding, does anybody remember what that is? When, with a straight line, right? With the straight line, if it crosses the x-axis, what's that called? The X-Intercept, right? It's where the x line, it's where the line is intersecting, right? Intercepting the x-axis, right? So you're trying to find the x-intercepts. Finding the x-intercepts. Now, what we're about to do, because once we start doing it, you're going to be amazed at how simple it is, right? But you have to understand the power of what you're doing. When you have a parabola, right, it's amazingly important to know and powerful to know these 2 points. And those 2 points for a parabola on the x-axis is what we're going to learn how to find, okay? Now, what is, let's say, boom, boom, 4. Okay, what is this point right here? How would you describe that point as a coordinate point?
Introvert.
Well, what is it? What is it? Is it like 4, 7 or 2, 1 or negative?
It is negative 2. What?
Yeah. So it's negative 2, what?
1.
Did I go up 1 or is it 0?
0.
It's 0.
It's 0. What's this one? 1, 2, 3, 4.
4, 0.
4, 0. What's 0? Is that the x or the y?
The y.
Does everybody agree? Because a point is x, y, right? Everybody agrees that the y is always 0 when you're on the x-axis. Do you guys agree with me? Yes?
Yeah.
So in order to find an x-intercept, all I have to do is make y equal to 0. You guys do this when we're graphing standard form equations. Remember when I give you an equation like this, 2x plus 3y equals 6, and I ask you to graph that? Remember, you do this, you do an x and a y, you have a 0 here and a 0 here, right? When you make y 0, you're finding the x-intercept. When you make y 0, you're finding the x-intercept. And it's a point on the x-axis. Remember that? Well, we're going to be doing that with parabolas. Only with parabolas, you have 3 possibilities. How many? So these two things right here. So Caleb, come on. You threw your pencil. I saw you threw it. These 2 points are. God, when you guys do this, I lose my train. I'm trying to really focus, right? And it really doesn't help. Okay. So Caleb, Ron, can you face forward, please? Forward, please. Feet, legs, inside. Okay. So, what was I saying? Does anybody remember? Yes.
On the x and y axis, it's like.
Oh yeah, I know what I was going to say. So thank you, Tom. There's 3 possibilities for solutions in terms of number of solutions you could have. This is a solution and this is a solution. This parabola has how many solutions? 2. Here's another parabola. How many solutions does that parabola have? 1 solution. Here's another parabola. How many solutions does that have?
0.
No solutions. It doesn't cross the x-axis. So it has it's still a parabola, but it doesn't cross the x-axis, so it has no solutions, okay? So, but what we're going to do today is learn how to find the zeros, or find where the x crosses, the parabola crosses the x-axis. And that is actually called different things. It's called solving. There's different names for this. And this is weird. I don't know why they have to have so many different names for this, but they do. You could say find the X-Intercepts. You could see that. It could say solve. That means find the x when y is 0. Solve means find x when y is 0. Find x when y equals 0. You can see find the zeros. This is a very common one, finding the zeros. So you're going to hear that a lot this year and next year and the next year and the next year, finding the zeros. And the last one is find the roots. Those are all the same thing. So you kind of have to know those terms. You already know what an x-intercept is. It's where the thing crosses the x-axis. Finding the zeros is finding where it crosses the x-axis when y is 0. Because that's why they call it finding the zeros. What are the x's when y is 0, right? Which is the same as this, solving. Okay? So here we go. This is how you do it. And notice I said we're going to solve factored quadratic equations today. Meaning, you guys already know how to factor quadratics, right? But we're not going to worry about that because right now does that make sense?
Whoa.
So instead of like this, y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c, you're going to see something like this. Y is equal to x plus 4 times x minus a. You're going to see something like that. It's already factored. You see what I mean when I say factored?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what we're going to do. And it's really pretty simple. Let me think. What can I do? What did I just put up there? What was that?
X plus 4 and
X plus 4?
Yeah. And then
X minus 7? Okay, and it says y equals, right? All right, in order to solve, Rowan, I'm sorry, Rowan, this is my lecture, right?
Sorry.
In order to find the zeros, this is what we're doing, finding the zeros, find the zeros. In order to do that, what we're going to do is we are going to make y equal 0. Does that make sense? Okay, watch this. So, and I'm going to put my 0 on the right. If y is equal to this, that's equal to y. Don't you agree with me?
Yeah.
Right? So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say x plus 4 times x minus 7 equals 0. So Ron, you should be writing this down. Are you all these things in your notes? This is really important. You're not going to have a clue how to do any of this if you don't write this down. Okay? So so this times this equals 0. What do we know about this or this? Do we know anything? As long as these two things equal 0, what do we know? Do we?
They're like terms.
Well, they are because they're both x's. You know, we're multiplying by blobs with x's in them. That's true.
Oh,
But
they're on foil.
what if I did this? What if I said this? What if I said a times b equals 0? What do I know about these two numbers? Or about at least one of these numbers? When you multiply two numbers together and they equal 0.
One of them is 0.
One of them, do you agree with it? Is that right? One of them has to be 0, right? Is that true?
Yes.
Right? 4 times 0 would be what? 0. Or 0 times 7 is equal to 0, right? The only way I'm going to get a 0 by multiplying these is one of these has to be 0.
Or both.
Maybe both of them. Maybe both of them. But one of them definitely has to be. Is that right? You get that? So there's this awesome rule that when you set something equal to 0, it's called the zero product property. This is okay. The zero product property. And this is why we can do what we do. If a times b equals 0, then either a equals 0 or b equals 0. Does that make sense? That's what we just said, right? So I know that a or b equals 0. So think of this as your a, and think of this as your b. Okay? You with me? If a times b equals 0, then I know that either a equals 0, meaning x plus 4 equals 0, or x minus 7 equals 0. Now it starts to get easy. Watch this. So what I do is I create two equations. A plus 4 equals 0, and I write the word or, x minus 7 equals 0, and I solve for a. I'm sorry, not a, x, sorry. X, right? Either this equals 0 or this equals 0. So I've got my two equations, and I'm going to solve for x. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides, and that gives me x is equal to negative 4. And I'm going to add 7 to both sides here. That gives me x is equal to 7. So I know on my graph, I know that this parabola at negative 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, dot, and at positive 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, dot, I know my parabola crosses those 2 points. So I don't know exactly what my parabola looks like, but it's going to be approximately like that. Something like that, right? I have no idea right now how far down it goes, but I do know that it's going to cross those 2 places, right? Does that make sense?
Is that it?
That's it. That's all you're going to be doing today.
Oh, that's easy.
It's easy. It's easy. So let's practice a few, and so that we can I erase this part?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Let's practice a few. This is called finding the zeros. All right. So number 2. I'll start with y is equal to x minus 3 times x minus 5. So I'm going to make my y 0, right? That's my first step, make y 0. So I'm going to do x minus 3 times x minus 5 equals 0. Right? You with me?
Yeah.
And now, if this times this equals 0, then this or this, one of these 2 has to be 0. Maybe both of them, right? So I'm going to figure out all the possibilities. Either x minus 3 equals 0, or x minus 5 equals 0. And I add 3 to both sides. I get x is equal to 3. Add 5 to both sides, and x is equal to 5. Right? And my answer is those 2. I say both. I say x equals 3 or x equals 5. Okay? Make sense? Okay, now we're going to make it slightly harder. It's not that much harder.
Okay, no, that's
It's not that much harder.
That's the point.
All right, what if I gave you this? Number 3. Now, number 3. Y is equal to 2x plus
Oh my god!
3 times 3x minus 1. Okay? So, again, I'm trying to find the zeros. Find x when y is 0. So I'm going to make this equal to 0. Does that make sense? I'm just setting this equal to 0, making y 0. And that means that either this equals 0 or this equals 0. So I write my 2 equations. 2x plus 3 equals 0, or 3x minus 1 equals 0. Okay? Now I got to finish it. I've got to solve for x, right? That's what I do. So I subtract 3. Subtract 3, I've got 2x is equal to negative 3. What do I have to do now?
divide.
Divide by 2, right? Divide by 2. Divide by 2. There's my answer. X is that fraction, negative 3 halves.
Is that it?
And that's it. Now we'll try this one. We're going to add 1 to both sides. We have 3x is equal to 1. Now I divide by 3, right? Because I want to say x equals. X is equal to 1/3. And I put the word or in there, and I put it in a box, and I'm done.
Alright, I completely get it.
Make sense?
Yeah, this means
Okay. Let's do one more just to be safe. One more. Let's say we do 4. So y is equal to 5x minus 7 times 4x plus 3. Okay, so help me out. What do I do? What's the first step?
You would do 5x minus 7 equals
No, wait,
0
what'd you make it
and
equal?
4x.
I have to make it equal to 0
Oh, yeah.
first, right? So, okay, go ahead. Now say it.
5x minus 7 equals 0,
Right?
and then 4x plus 3 equals 0.
Right.
So,
Okay, so add 7, right? Add 7. 5x is equal to 7. Divide by 5. So I got x is equal to 7/5. Right? Subtract 3, subtract 3. 4x is equal to negative 3. Divide by 4. X is equal to negative 3/4.
now, is that the answer, or do you have to graph it?
You don't have to graph them. I'm not asking you to graph them. It's But understand what you're doing when you're doing this. You're figuring out where they cross the x-axis. That's all it is. So I know at 7/5, what is that? 1 and 2/5, right? 1 and 2/5. So like right around here. Does that make sense? And then this one is -3/4. Here's -1, -3/4 is around here. So I know my parabola is, something like
You
that.
have to actually graph it?
You don't have to graph it. I'm not asking you to graph it. I'm just wanting you to realize what you're solving is a point on the x-axis. Does that make sense? That's it. That's finding the zeros. Now, I made it easy for you tonight by having them in factored form. You're getting y is equal to a factored quadratic equation. Tomorrow night, or tomorrow's homework, we're going to actually write it out in this form, and you're going to have to factor it first, and then set it equal to 0 and find the zeros, right? Does that make sense? So today you're just focusing on with it already factored. Tomorrow you have to do the factoring yourself, and then find the zeros, okay? All right, that's it.
How